Argımak minip temendip, arız taman nazelidip.
Winds brush the vast steppe of Kyrgyzstan, stirring echoes of 1,000 years. The epic of manners not only sings of the Kyrgyz people's eternal pursuit of freedom and happiness, but also resounds with a legend featuring horses.
Байыркы Кыргыз тарыхында, айрыкча ошол улуу Манас баянында аргымактын орду өзгөчө болгон. Өзүн баатыр эле эсептеген эркек киши, өзүн эл башкарган атка минер болобу, баатыр болобу, аргымактын мыктысын минген. Ошол аргымаксыз баатыр эмес.
With their elevated status in Kyrgyz culture, horses are not only capable companions, but symbols of freedom, strength, and courage. As Nurbek Talambakov's melodies still echo on this vast steppe, his gaze turns to the east, beyond the Tian Shan mountains. Throughout the 5,000-year course of Chinese civilization, the horse has likewise emerged as an important spiritual totem.
咱们的天津博物馆呢，一个馆藏了一个很好的文物，它是唐代的是咱们本土制造的。这个马呢还有双翼它还有翅膀，就是两个前腿朝前，两个后腿是完全是个纵态了，就是这种姿态，它罗马时代已经出现了。
Yang Juping, a professor of history at Nankai University, has traveled across Asia, Europe, and Africa in the past decade, visiting more than 20 ancient cities along the Silk Road, tracing the roots of Eastern and Western civilizations. In his view, the Hellenistic world and the Silk Road were never parallel trajectories. The dialogue of civilizations has always been a process of continuous fusion and reconstruction. On this Tang Dynasty bronze mirror, featuring beasts, winged figures, and grape motifs, Western patterns and Eastern craftsmanship blend seamlessly, two aesthetics shaking hands, merging as one.
中国元素为主，外来元素呢也特别明显，主要就体现在这个葡萄味、人头味，还有那个女人，还有这个飞马。
In Tianjin Museum, this bronze mirror more than 1,000 years old exemplifies the brilliance of the Tang Dynasty. It likely once belonged to a Chang'an noblewoman. Its 11.3 centimeter diameter mirror back bears the motifs of grapevines inspired by ancient Greece, mythic beasts from China's central plains, and heavenly equines from western regions. Within mere inches lies a journey through millennia of civilization. Each motif adds to the story of fusion. The winged figure was known as an immortal in the Chinese classic text, Classic of Mountains and Seas. Yet on this bronze mirror, he transforms into a foreign figure wearing a pointed Scythian-style hat and Kushan boots. Fusion has become the cultural code that connected the Silk Road across mountains and waters.
中国文明和希腊文明的第一次相会的地方，不是在我们中亚，也不是在希腊，而是在中亚。亚历山大东征呢，最远的地方就征服了中亚和印度，其中建立了一个叫希腊人巴克特利亚王国，他把他们的文化呢带到了中亚这一带。这个200年以后呢，不是征钱就来了。这种大背景之下，就是希腊的一些文化也就通过丝绸之路就传到中国，就葡萄呀什么都就是这个时候传过来，包括飞马这些都有。
This heavenly horse on the edge of the mirror has a flame-like mane and 4 hooves that seem to stir the wind. It arrived in Chang'an along with grapes, but has its own legend. It's said that to obtain the heavenly horses of Dayuan, Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty sent an envoy bearing gold coins. Where is Dayuan? To answer that, we need to head west. This mountainous area between Tian Shan and the Alay mountain ranges is the Fergana Valley, on the borders of present-day Kyrgyzstan Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. In ancient times, this area was known as Dayuan. The Osh region is the gateway on the east edge of Fergana Valley, at the intersection of the Silk Road west of the Tian Shan Mountains. Since ancient times, it has served as a channel for cultural exchange and a hub where nomadic and agrarian societies have intertwined. About 7 kilometers northwest of Osh, on the rocky crest of the Aramaktu Mountains, stretching for roughly 1 kilometer, lie more than 10 rock art sites. Over 30 petroglyphs depict the heavenly horses of Dayuan in varied forms and styles.
马的驯化在人类历史上是一个革命性的划时代的这种事件。3000年前的这次的驯化是在哈萨克呀、吉尔吉斯呀、新疆啊这一带来实现的，所以这个地区呢有着悠久的马的驯养的历史。让马像长着翅膀一样能够飞奔起来，是当事人主要的一个愿望和诉求。于是乎便有了吉尔吉斯斯坦这个飞马岩画的一个诞生。汉代以后呢，这种题材也就传到我们中原地区。
At 1.1 meters tall, this is the largest of 30 petroglyphs. The image of a horse can be seen clearly. It has a slender head, high neck, and long limbs, the typical appearance of a heavenly horse as described in the account of Dayuan in records of the grand historian.
Это где-то период царства Давань. То, что мы видим Айрмач-то, эти районы были очагом, центром разведения этих коней. И неизбежно, что и культ поклонения, да, он, так сказать, процветал именно там. И туда мы включили Айрмач-то как святилище, посвященное небесным коням, свидетельство того, что Фергана, Давань и Китай очень активно, иногда и в воинственной форме, но и в культурной, очень активно общались.
Baka Tamanbayeva has spent her entire life exploring the mysteries behind these petroglyphs. 2,000 years of scorching sun, wind and frost have carved cracks into the rock. The carved lines became even more prominent through their struggle against time. This is the appearance of a budding civilization, from its initial reverence and longing gradually taking root, stretching and continuing endlessly.
Разные изображения диких и домашних животных, птиц, людей, геометрические символы, знаки, изображения ликов божеств, а также множество таких не поддающихся разъяснению рисунков. Для посещения комплекса Саймалуташ доступен.
Zhulduk Bakashova has long dedicated herself to the fields of history and archaeology, excavating the cultural bonds of the Silk Road. Archaeological discoveries have continually challenged people's inherent understanding of civilization's boundaries. The Silk Road was not only a trade channel, but also a dynamic arena where countless civilizations coexisted, defined both by conflict and by harmony. These short swords from the 6th century, once wielded by Turkic cavalry, bear engravings of Chinese cloud motifs on their hilts. Although the two civilizations once fiercely collided on the battlefield, their cultural legacies still intertwined as seen in this example.
Вот перед вами представлена коллекция. Это единовременный клад, поднятый с дна озера Иссык-Куль. И вот среди этой коллекции попалась вот такой бронзовый псалий. Это один из элементов конской утвари. Если вы края псалии представлены ярко выраженной головой дракона. Поэтому мы можем предположить, что это или китайское изделие, или изделие, сделанное по китайским технологиям.
This cultural heritage, long hidden in the depths of history, is like a key that gently unlocks the sealed door of an ancient civilization. When the horse bit adorned with a dragon's head emerged from the depths of Lake Issyk-Kul, it was as if the spirit of a horse that had galloped for millennia came rushing forth, carrying with it ancient stories and the marks of cultural fusion. That spirit still roams the lands of China and Central Asia, journeying through an endless river of civilization which flows with eternal communication and resonance.
In 2018, China's Shanghai Academy of Archaeology and the National Academy of Sciences of the Kyrgyz Republic joined forces to explore an ancient city in Kyrgyzstan, writing a new chapter of civilization exchange on this millennia-old land.
Она является результатом проникновения воды. А вот тут идет рыхлость, вот тут еще нет стены. Вот надо дальше немножко копать будет ниже. Спокойно вот это убирать все, не мешая все. Мы находимся на городище Красная речка. Работа с китайскими коллегами, она дает опыт соприкосновения разных традиций археологических. В Китае она немножко другая. Например, китайские специалисты очень активно используют так называемую лаянскую лопату. А китайские коллеги применяют очень часто для предварительных исследований обнаружения примерных границ стен.
The Red River ancient city mentioned by Valery Kolchenko is Krasnaya Rechka, a World Cultural Heritage Site. In 2018, Shanxi Academy of Archaeology teamed up with the National Academy of Sciences of the Kyrgyz Republic to explore this ancient city site, the largest of its kind in the Chu River Basin in Kyrgyzstan, reigniting a cross-civilization dialogue linked by horses. Shi Yanxin is a Chinese leader of this joint archaeological team. Under the scorching sun, he and his colleagues are recording information about the soil layers at the site.
我们首次把这个考古勘探引入到这个红河遗址。这个城市大约是在5到6世纪由粟特人始建，一直使用到12到13世纪。这个墙体啊，我们可以看到有喀拉汗时期的补筑的痕迹，也就是说，这个城址是长时间的沿用使用，也见证了这个丝绸之路的繁荣。
The fusion of civilizations is like the layering of soils from different eras on a city wall.
Shi Yanxin notes that the stele unearthed here is made of red sandstone from Kyrgyzstan, but adopts a Chinese sculpting style.
While its flowing robes incorporate elements of Greco-Buddhist art. When different civilizations meet a single artifact, the Silk Road's code of harmony in diversity is unveiled.
一带一路建设一个重要的基础就是民心相通，而我们的考古工作就是促进民心相通，促进人文交流合作，促进互相了解和理解的一个不可缺少的一个工作。
Archaeology is not just cold excavation, but rather a journey through the dusts of time, listening to the heartbeat of civilizations. It reminds us that the brilliance of civilization shines ever brighter through mutual exchange and integration. Today, Kyrgyz craftsmen continue to tell epic stories through their patterns. They embroider motifs into felt carpets and make peonies bloom on silver ornaments. Civilization is like a mirror, reflecting the path behind us and illuminating the way home.